Turning to a big case in New York, the defendant in the UnitedHealthcare CEO murder case was arraigned today. Luigi Mangione was in federal court in New York for his arraignments. Now a reminder, cameras are not allowed in federal court. Mangione is accused of murdering UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan just last December. This arraignment comes just one day after federal prosecutors filed an intent to seek the death penalty against Mangione. Federal prosecutors say he deserves the death penalty because, quote, Mangione expressed intent to target an entire industry and rally political and social opposition to that industry by engaging in an act of lethal violence. Joining us now, Scripps News correspondent Alex Miller. She is at the New York Federal Courthouse where that arraignment took place. Tell us, please, what is the latest, Alex?
Well, Luigi Mangione pleaded not guilty to those 4 federal charges relating to stalking, murder, and firearms charges. He came into the courtroom today in a tan jumpsuit with his arms shackled behind him. He had a bit of a haircut and seemed pretty calm as he spoke with his attorneys, which was kind of the demeanor that we saw back in December when he was arraigned in the state court just down the street. But then he was able to wear his own personal clothes, this time in that tan jumpsuit. Again, he had a very calm demeanor, but it is what happened during that arraignment that I found most interesting. There were 2 major points of contention here. The first one dealing with when this trial is going to happen. The judge essentially set the schedule for the rest of the year. The prosecution will have to turn over discovery by May 27th, and the trial date for 2026 will be set on December 5th. So there's a lot of deadlines in between those 2 dates, but those are arguably the most important dates we need to be paying attention to this year. Now, there was a bit of a deal between the state and the federal government, according to Mangione's attorney, Karen Friedman-Agnifilo, that the state would be the one to go first when it comes to the trial. Now, it seems as though the defense does not want that to happen. Friedman-Agnifilo, saying that if for some reason the death penalty is on the table, which we know it is in this federal case, that there's a constitutional reason for the federal case to go first. Now, the judge did not say whether or not she agreed, but she did say that she is planning to treat this case as if it were the only case. And of course, we know not only is there the state case as well, but there's also a case out of Pennsylvania. So there are going to be other attorneys, other deadlines that she is going to have to contend with. But there was one other bombshell at the end of the 30-minute hearing, which was that Karen Friedman-Agnifilo said that the attorneys for the government and the state have been listening in on Luigi Mangione's phone calls. Now, we know obviously phone calls can be recorded, but we're talking about the phone calls recorded with his attorneys. Now, according to Friedman-Agnifilo, she's already spoken with the state about this, but they say that those phone calls were handed over by the Southern District of New York and that only one person listened in on those phone calls. Now, the judge incredibly upset about this, saying that she wants to hear from the federal government as to how this could have happened and what their plans are to rectify this. The federal government said it was the first time they were hearing of it, but said that they would make sure that there was every effort made to make sure he was able to talk on a secure phone line with his attorneys. And so those were the big kind of issues that we saw inside the courtroom. But there is a lot of concern about the ability to get a fair jury here, and the judge made a point to tell the government that they need to talk to the Department of Justice all the way up to the Attorney General to make sure that they're not making any public comments that could impact Luigi Mangione's ability to get a fair trial.
Yeah, that attorney-client privilege is something that is sacrosanct, and so that's a huge issue for the court, I'm sure. Can I ask you, Alex, what is the environment like? Because when you look at social media, we know he has quite the following in spite of the charges leveled against him. Are there a lot of people there?
Yeah, inside of the courtroom, they allowed for about 2 rows of public seating, and out of the roughly 20 people there, nearly all were women, young women, I should say. Chelsea Manning, also the whistleblower from the federal government, she was there. She was also there when I was in court with him for those state charges, so he had support inside of the courtroom, but also outside of the courtroom. When I walked out this afternoon, there were paid trucks going around, those digital trucks that had signs supporting Mangione. There was a crowd out here chanting with lots of different signs, but there was one person there who seemed to be opposing, not necessarily even Mangione, but the protesters themselves. He came out with what looked like an electric chair and had a skeleton that was dressed up to be Mangione sitting in that electric chair. So we are now about 2 hours out of court getting let out, and there are still people here protesting this hearing today.
Wow, so much going on. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us with this great report there live in New York. Still with us, I want to bring back in trial attorney Wendy Patrick. Wendy, I want you to weigh in on the publicity of this case. What do you think about the argument, the concern that they're not going to be able to get a fair jury? Again, this is in the federal case. He also has state charges, but specifically in this federal case.
You know, Ashley, we all went through the OJ case, years and years ago, and we thought, that was a day and age where pretrial publicity was more likely, much more likely today to impact a case. Social media is ubiquitous nowadays, and there is nobody that doesn't know what Luigi Mangione is accused of doing. They don't know the particulars because obviously we haven't had the discovery exchange, but where would you move it? You could move it to the moon and you'd find somebody that knew about the case. It's got such widespread publicity. Here's one of the issues at this point. The time between the offense and the trial is going to be well over a year. Within that time frame, much more will have happened on many other cases. Whether or not a case needs to be moved is probably better analyzed closer in time to when a jury is actually going to be impaneled, because they're far less likely to have those memories fresh in their mind because the arraignment just happened. We all know cases are most sensational right after they occur. And that's one of the reasons a long trial date is really a benefit to both sides that don't want jurors that are going to be implicated or influenced by anything that didn't come out of a witness's mouth in the courtroom. That's the danger, is they won't remember where they saw the evidence. You want them to make sure they confine their deliberation to what came out in court.
And that they can be fair and impartial. Great points, Wendy Patrick. Stay with us.